Good morning, and welcome to Bible Study Live with Matt. Today is March 10th, 2022. It is a Thursday, and today I want to talk about your dumpster fire witness. We could have called this dumpster fire theology. Listen, what do I mean by that? I mean, the world is a dumpster fire right now, right? There's chaos everywhere. I saw something this morning that certain politicians passed a deal in the middle of the night. We've got a war going on in Ukraine right now, which is horrible. The people are suffering. It is a mess, isn't it? Like, literally, the world that we live in is a mess. But none of this should be surprising. I mean, after all, it is a broken world. But in spite of that, how do we still honor God with our lives? How do we represent Jesus with our lives? How do we honor him? How do we do all of that in the midst of a world in chaos? Let me say that again. How do we honor God with our lives? How do we give a good representation to people of what following Jesus is about without compromising the truth? How do we do that in a world that's just a hot mess? Well, we have been in the story of the compassionate father, story of the prodigal son, story of the unforgiving brother, whatever you want to call that story. We've been digging into it for days. God has put this on my heart so many times. It's great, by the way. I use my iPhone 12 as my camera for these live streams, and right behind it, there are two photos that bring me just an immense amount of joy. One of them on the wall is a picture of my son Cullen, my son Liam, and my daughter Jillian from 2009 when they were young, and the new Camaro hadn't been out long, and I had, was spending time with them in Michigan, and there was a bright orange new Camaro in the parking lot of Chuck E. Cheese, and they wanted, like, they were like, "Oh, it's so cool," and I was like, "All right, well, let's get a picture by it." I took a picture of them by it, and the other one is my wife and I before we were married, when we were still just dating. And we were on a trip in Kansas City, Missouri. It was the second time I'd gotten to see my wife. Brings me so much joy to see these photos, literally right behind the camera. Anyways, some of you probably do not care about that, but I care, and it's my show, so I was telling you about it. Anyways, so how do we live this out? How do we honor God? How do we show people really the love of Jesus and what his message, his mission, his ministry was about? How do we do that without compromising the truth in a world that's in the middle of a war, where we have politicians on both sides of the aisle just lying to everybody? Because we do. I don't care what side you're on. They both sides lie, right? I mean, it is what it is. So how do we do that? Well, we've been in this story of the prodigal son, the compassionate father, the unforgiving brother. We've been in this story for days because God has really laid it on my heart that there is something in here. There is a remez, a nugget of wisdom deep in this story for each of us. And so we're going to dig into it again today, because I want to say, I think that the way that we live it out, the way that we can honor God, is to take a lesson from the end of this story. And so that's what we're going to look at this morning. So I'm just going to pop it up on the screen. I want to read it to you. I want to share it with you. And if you got a Bible, you can get it open, but we're going to read from Luke chapter 15. And to recap the story, by the way, here's what's happened. Younger son comes to dad. "I want my inheritance." Basically says, "Hey, you're dead to me. I'm out of here. Give me my stuff. I'm gone." His inheritance would be 1/3, even though there are only two brothers, because the older brother's the horse, so he gets double portion. So the younger says, "Give me my 1/3 of my stuff. I want to go." And he goes, he squanders it away. He ends up slopping pigs for a living. The folks he is working for are so ruthless, they won't even allow him to share in the food that the pigs eat. He can't even eat those, right? Because to them, the pigs are more important than him. Mm, mm, mm. Their livelihood is more important than him, more important than the humans working for them. Man, sounds a lot like the world today too, doesn't it? Needless to say, the kid realizes, man, my life is a hot mess. I've made some stupid choices. I need to go back to my dad, tell him, "Hey, I'm sorry," and tell him I know I'm not worthy of being his kid, but if he'll just hire me to work for him, I know that the people that work for my dad get taken care of better than what's happening here. So I'm going to go home. So he hits the road, heads home, and when he gets there, this is where we're going to pick up the story. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him, his heart pounding. He ran out and embraced him. By the way, I am reading from the Message translation, and boy, oh boy, I love it. Says his father, his heart was pounding. He ran out and embraced him and kissed him. The son started his speech. He had been preparing this speech to give to his dad about his unworthiness. Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son again. But the father wasn't listening. Stop. This is what is so powerful in this world today. It says the father wasn't listening. Now, oftentimes we say, I'm not being heard. You don't hear me. I want to be heard. And that's a struggle. But in this case, it's good when we see the father wasn't listening. Why is it good? Here's why. Because the father wasn't listening because the father had already chosen not to hold a grudge against his son. His son wronged him. His son took his inheritance. His son left. But the father had already made the choice. He wasn't going to hold a grudge. See, we have a choice in life. We have a choice in life. We have a choice in life of how we're going to respond to people who do us dirty. We do have a choice. And you know what this father chose? Love. He chose not to hold a grudge. What he chose was the same thing God chose from the beginning of the creation story. See, even though it's not written at the beginning of the story, since God knew what was coming, God chose this. The father in the story chose to forgive. And that's why he didn't listen when his son came back and started giving him the, hey, dad, I'm so sorry speech. Father wasn't listening because the father had already forgiven the moment that the son did what he did. The father had already chosen to forgive the moment the son did what he did. As a matter of fact, I would argue, although it does not say so in the story, the actions do teach us this. I would argue the father had chose to be a forgiving father long before his son ever wronged him. And that's something we can learn from in this world. See, it says in the scriptures that when the son was a long way off, father saw him, heart pounding, ran out, embraces him, he kisses him, son starts to speak, Father, I've sinned against God, I've sinned before you. It says, but the father wasn't listening. Why wasn't he listening? I'll tell you why. He was calling the servants. Quick, bring a clean set of clothes, dress him, put the family ring on his finger, sandals on his feet, then get a prize winning heifer and roast it. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son's here, given up for dead, now alive, given up for lost, now found. And they began to have a wonderful time. Wonderful time. Wonderful time. Wonderful time. Okay. We're going to hit this right now. We're going to hit this. This father had chosen that he was going to be a forgiving father. He had two sons. He had chosen to be a forgiving father. Now, this son came. He knew he wronged him. Comes back. Dad's not listening. Dad's like, boom, party time. My son's home. Right? Like, so he had chosen to forgive. Now, how does this tie into the world that we live in today? Well, I'll show you because this is not the only people in the story. Okay. Let's fast forward to the end, right? Party's getting ready. Older brother hears about it, goes off. He's angry. He's outside. He's sulking. And then the dad comes out to try to talk to him. But this kid now is being a jerk to his dad. And he's like, what have you ever done for me? What have you ever done for me? You don't give me even a goat to party with my friends, and I'm doing all the good stuff. I'm doing all the right stuff. What have you ever done for me? Now, the dad could have just reprimanded him right there. He could have said, oh, I've done nothing for you. Bounce, beat it. You get nothing. He could have. But like I said, I think this father chose to be a forgiver even before he had sons. Because a moment like this arose, and he handles it in an amazing way. The father says this, son, you don't understand. You're with me all the time. Everything that's mine is yours. But this is a wonderful time, and we got to celebrate. This brother of yours was dead, and he's alive. He was lost, and he's found. So here's how we live this out today. In the midst of a world in chaos, you know what we do? We choose that before we get wronged, we're going to be forgivers. The way we live out and honor God and honor Jesus with our lives in 2022, while there's a war going on, while we disagree with each other politically, while there's 38,000 plus denominations who are literally bickering hatefully with one another about what, minutia in different translations of scripture. We're arguing over the things that we don't have certainty on as if we have certainty. And the world is watching us. See, just like this story of the compassionate father, prodigal son, unforgiving brother, just like this story, there were people watching their family. How many of us think, man, the people watching this, the servants must have been like, what a dumpster fire this family is. What a mess they are. You've got a younger son who takes his inheritance and blows it on hookers. You've got an older son who's always had the ability to have every single thing in his father's home, who's sitting here telling his dad he's never given him anything. And then his dad the whole time is going, I love you both. I love you. What's mine is yours. Sounds like a Jerry Springer episode, doesn't it? But that's the beautiful thing in this story. See, people were watching the chaos of this family unfold. They were watching people that wronged each other, these sons that wronged their dad. The older son who was just wrongly angry at his brother because his brother did his father dirty. And then his response to being angry about his brother doing his father dirty, when his father says, well, I'm going to choose to forgive him. Then the brother's response is, well, then I'm going to do you dirty, Dad. I'm going to tell you how you've never done well. And all the while, everyone's watching. How's the father going to respond? He says, son, you don't get it. Everything I got is yours and always has been. They see the younger son come back, and the father says, yes, throw a party. My son's home. He is alive after all. How do we live this out in a world filled with chaos? How do we live it out when we've got a war going on overseas? We've got Russia invading the Ukraine and doing horrible things to people. How do we live this out when we have politicians that pass $1.5 trillion bills in the middle of the night? How do we live this out when we had a president who was vulgar and did some disgusting things? And no, I'm not talking about the current one. I'm talking about the previous one. He did. How do we live it out when we got the current president doing some vulgar and disgusting things? How do we live it out when we have people in leadership all over the world that are all self-serving? I don't care what color your political stripes are. None of these politicians are putting you before self. So how do we do this? I say we look at this father. Now, whether this story is a metaphor that Jesus was using to talk about the father as God and the prodigal as the people returning to God and the older brother as the Pharisees, it could be metaphoric. Could be a real story Jesus knew about some real people. None of that matters. What matters is the lesson the story is trying to teach us. What is the nugget of wisdom? What is the remez? Because on the surface level, the pashat, the surface level of the story is uh, forgive. So that way, when someone comes back asking for it, your heart is ready to forgive them because you've chosen to forgive regardless of what they've chosen. That's a good surface level story. But the deeper story, the remez, the nugget of wisdom hidden in this story that we can use today is this: have a heart of forgiveness, not just for the person that needs it, not just because you don't want to carry around bitterness, but because people are watching and deciding whether or not they think this Jesus is worth studying. They're trying to decide, do I want to be a disciple of this Jesus? They People are making that decision based on what they see about Christians and our behavior. I was part of I went to a meeting yesterday called Living Scent in Murfreesboro. Beautiful, beautiful bunch of business owners, business owners who have a heart for Jesus and a heart for helping other people know Jesus. And they're going, how do we live this out in the workplace? And it was such a cool experience. And the gentleman that runs it said something to me because I'm speaking at it in April, and he said something to me. He said, our goal here is to bring Sunday into Monday. And I thought, man, that's so cool, because the heart behind that statement is, hey, we want to help people know Jesus. We don't want to be church going Sunday Christians. And I think the way that we do that is to choose to be forgivers. Now, I am not pretending for one moment this is easy, but imagine, my friends, my brothers and sisters, imagine if when people saw you in your life, they went, I don't understand why this person is willing to forgive these people that have done them wrong. I got to talk to them and ask. See, we think we've got to go out there with a bullhorn, metaphorically, sometimes physically. We think in order to help people know Jesus, we've got to go out there and we've got to throw Jesus, interject Jesus in the conversation. I've read all kinds of books that talk about like look for opportunities to slip Jesus into the conversation. Like, oh, somebody's like, hey, and I've actually said that before too to people. I'm like, well, how do I share my faith? Well, just look for opportunities. If somebody, is saying, man, it looks like you had some good things. Oh, yeah, let me just tell you how Jesus was so good to me. And I'm not saying avoid talking about God. No, by no means would I suggest that. But what I am saying is sometimes we think that our calling and mission as Christians is to open our mouth. And there's a quote often attributed to Francis of Assisi, and I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to pull it up because this quote is often attributed to him. But he didn't actually say it. It says, preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words. It's unknown who said that. But it often gets, credit gets given to Francis of Assisi, but it's been shown that it wasn't him that said it. But let me just say it again. Preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words. What does that mean? Well, the great 21st century theologian, Andy Mineo, said, your life may be the only Bible that someone reads. See, how we live, how we love one another, how we forgive can make the difference of whether somebody says, I want to know this Jesus, or I have no desire to know this Jesus. Think about that for a minute. Now, some people will take that statement as a heavy burden. Oh, you mean if I don't do things right, somebody may go to hell? No, no. Someone's salvation does not hinge on you. Jesus did the rescuing. Jesus did the saving work. What I am saying is to experience the kingdom of God in its fullness means to experience it while we are alive on this earth. It means to be able to experience and live out the love of God toward other people on earth. It's to experience the blessing here on earth. So if we don't know Jesus, we don't get to live in the fullness of God. Hear these words, live. We don't get to live in the fullness of God. This isn't escapism. I'm not talking about whether or not you're going to get to escape this place to go to the other place. I'm talking about someone may never become a disciple of Jesus and never experience the fullness of God's love in their life on earth if they don't see God's love through you and me. Now, do we have to be perfect? No, I'm not going to be. I'm going to try. I'm going to fail. I don't have the same confidence as the Apostle Paul in a letter where he's writing, telling people, "Hey, just look look at me and do like I'm doing." Uh, and it's funny. My wife and I were talking about that the other day, and I was like, "Man, that takes chutzpah to be like, oh, do what I'm doing." Same guy who later writes, "Why do I do the things that I hate and hate the things that I do?" There's the reason I don't tell people do what I do because eventually I'm going to do something you should not do. I'm going to do something stupid. And then you're going to be like, oh, yep, there's those hypocritical Christians again. My buddy Jeremy and his wife Jessica had been doing youth ministry for 19 years. And last night, my wife Dara and I got to sit in and be flies on the back of the wall and listen to him teach a room full of teenagers a very valuable lesson that all of us have been through stuff. And because of experiences, either from our parents, grandparents, or the things we've done, people will put a label on us. You're broken, you're sad, you're suicidal, you're an a-hole, you're a liar, you're a cheater. They're going to take your past experiences and they're going to propel them into the present and try and label you with it. But the cool thing is that there's some truth here. See, I love what Jeremy did. He had these kids write it down, not put their name on it, and just leave it on the stage so he could pray over each one. I was like, whoop, that's so good. Because these kids need to be able to leave those feelings of who they are behind and realize who they really are. And you and I need it too. See, the story in the Bible doesn't begin in Genesis 3 with you are a sinner and Jesus. No, 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 no. The story begins with in the beginning, God created. And when he gets to humanity, it says, we were created in his image. Peace, love, grace, mercy, all of that. And God knew what we would do to his son and to him, and he chose to create us anyway, which means in the beginning, God forgave. How do we live this out in the world? We go back to the beginning. And in the beginning, God forgave. Will you, my friends, choose to be forgivers like God? I'm not asking you, will you choose to be perfect? But if we want to live it out, we want to be a great witness, like a true witness that causes people to say, I want to learn more about that Jesus, then we have to begin in the beginning. And just like God, we have to choose to forgive in spite of what could and is happening today. I'm going to keep trying. And I want to invite you to keep trying with me because love wins. The light overcomes the darkness. That's how the story ends. And that's actually how the story begins. It was evening, it was morning, day 2. Darkness, light. Keep moving forward. Hey, speaking of love, I want to invite you to get an advanced copy of our new marriage book coming out next month called For This Reason, How to Live in Ephesians 5 Marriage. If you want to hook up, text love to 833-981-0002. Standard messaging and data rates apply. Thanks for joining me for Bible Study Live with Matt. I'll see you tomorrow for the last one of the week.